There was a woman, a single mother. She worked two jobs, not for luxury, not for applause, but for survival, for her children, for their future, for the belief that her sacrifice today would pave the way for their tomorrow. One day, after years of struggle, she saved enough to buy herself a first-class seat on a flight, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a quiet victory. A reminder to herself that she belonged not only in the struggle, but also in the reward. Yet, when she stepped forward, boarding pass in hand, she was told, "Not here." Not you. They looked past her story. They judged her appearance, her clothes, her being, and in that moment she was denied more than a seat. She was denied dignity. But she did not rage. She did not surrender. She sat quietly, resolved, and waited. Minutes later, turbulence struck. Confusion broke out in the cabin. Flight attendants scrambled, and the calm of the aircraft shattered. And there she was, the same woman dismissed, the same woman overlooked, rising to her feet. You see, this mother was also a trained nurse. And when a passenger fell unconscious, when panic consumed the plane, it was her hands, her knowledge, her courage that steadied the flight. She saved a life that day, and suddenly all eyes turned toward her. The woman they said did not belong in first class became the reason the entire flight made it safely through chaos. Friends, this is not just her story. It is our story, because every day ordinary people rise above extraordinary challenges. Every day, someone told they don't belong finds the strength to show why they do. Every day, hope is tested, and every day, it can triumph. This single mother reminds us perseverance is not just endurance, it is transformation. That true worth is not measured by the seat assigned to us, but by the service we render to others. That dignity cannot be denied by gatekeepers, because it lives within us. So tonight, let us carry her story forward. Let us believe that the impossible can bend to the will of perseverance. Let us remember that greatness is not confined to titles, nor to wealth, nor to the places society tells us we belong. It is born in the human spirit. And let us act with courage, with empathy, with a conviction that tomorrow can be brighter if we do our part today. Because when one of us rises, we all rise. When one mother breaks through, a generation sees the path. When one denied seat turns into a saved life, the world learns again that no act of perseverance is ever wasted. When that single mother stepped forward to board, ticket in hand, she was met not with welcome, but with suspicion. The look in the gate agent's eyes told her that she did not fit the picture of first class. Her clothes were practical, her shoes worn from long days and longer nights. She did not wear luxury brands or carry a polished leather briefcase. And so, without ever asking her story, she was judged. They told her that the seat she had earned, the space she had paid for, was not for her. In that moment, she stood at a crossroads familiar to many of us. The moment when the world says, "You don't belong here." The moment when others attempt to reduce your worth to the label on your clothes, the color of your skin, the size of your bank account, or the assumptions they make in a split second. It is a wound we know too well, a wound that cuts deeper because it is not about what we can do, but about who they believe we are. And yet, here is where her story begins to shine. She could have shouted. She could have demanded. She could have let her anger erupt into words that would only confirm the stereotypes held against her. But instead, she chose dignity. She chose to sit in quiet strength, knowing that her value could not be stripped away by a denied seat. She carried herself with the poise of someone who understood that what others try to withhold cannot diminish what is already within. That is the essence of dignity. It is not the uniform we wear, not the space we occupy, not the approval we are granted. Dignity is the unshakable recognition that every human being carries within them an inherent worth. It is the shield that protects us when society attempts to tell us that our place is smaller, our role lesser, our contribution invisible. Her seat was denied, yes, but her dignity was untouched, because dignity cannot be denied by another. It is not a gift that others bestow, it is a truth that resides in the core of who we are. And this is a lesson for us all. How often do we allow others to define us? Often do we shrink ourselves because someone else decided that we were not enough. The single mother reminds us that worthiness does not ask for permission. It does not beg to be recognized. It does not need validation from a gatekeeper or a passing glance. Worthiness is lived, breathed, and proven through resilience. When turbulence struck and panic set in, it was not the label of first-class passenger that saved a life. It was her knowledge, her compassion, her calm presence under pressure. It was the same dignity she had carried quietly after being told no that empowered her to rise and say yes when others needed her. Think of that contrast. Earlier, she was judged unworthy of a seat. Moments later, she was the reason the flight was safe. What changed? Not her. What changed was the recognition of her value. The worth that had always been present, though overlooked, became undeniable when revealed in action. This is the paradox of dignity. It does not increase when others see it. It does not diminish when others deny it. It remains steady, constant, inviolable. The world may catch up to it, or it may continue to look away. But dignity remains, waiting for its moment to be revealed, sometimes in the quiet patience of endurance, sometimes in the roar of extraordinary courage. Her story challenges us to remember that seats can be denied, promotions withheld, opportunities delayed, and recognition postponed. But dignity cannot be taken because dignity is not external. It is not the applause of the crowd or the stamp of approval from an institution. Dignity is the decision to stand, to persevere, and to believe in one's worth even when others fail to see it. And when we understand that truth, we begin to live differently. We no longer beg for entry into rooms that question our presence. We walk into them knowing that our presence itself is proof of worth. We no longer let rejection define us. We let it refine us, preparing us for the moments when our true strength will be needed. That single mother's calm refusal to surrender her dignity is not just her victory, it is a mirror held up to each of us. Because all of us, at some point, will be told, not here, not you. And all of us will face the choice to let that denial wound us, or to carry ourselves with the quiet conviction that no denial can undo who we are. When the agent at the counter told her she could not sit in the seat she had purchased, the sting of rejection burned quietly in her chest. For her, this was not just about a seat on a plane. It was about every time she had been told, no, when she had worked twice as hard for half as much. It was about every door that closed when she stood outside, hoping only for the chance to prove what she already knew about herself. It was about every whispered judgment from strangers who did not know her sacrifices, her long nights, her battles fought in silence. Rejection has a way of echoing across a lifetime. It brings back the voices of teachers who underestimated us, employers who overlooked us, neighbors who dismissed us. For that single mother, the denial of her rightful seat could have been just one more wound, just one more moment to reinforce the lie that she did not belong. But the extraordinary truth is this: sometimes rejection is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a greater one. As she sat quietly in a different row, holding her emotions together, life was already preparing the stage for her redemption. She did not know that turbulence was on its way. She did not know that a fellow passenger would collapse. She did not know that in less than an hour, the same people who overlooked her would be looking to her for help. But this is how life works. What looks like rejection can, in the turn of a moment, reveal itself as preparation. The very space we are pushed into, the very place where we feel hidden or humiliated, can become the platform where our courage, our skill, our humanity is revealed. Rejection, painful as it feels, can strip away illusion. It forces us to ask, do I believe in my worth only when others recognize it, or do I carry it regardless? That single mother had already answered this question with her life. She had endured hardship without applause. She had raised children without medals. She had chosen resilience again and again when no one was watching. The rejection she faced at the gate was sharp, but it was not new. She knew what it meant to be told, "You don't belong here." And because she had carried herself with dignity through countless unseen trials, she was ready when the stage of redemption appeared. When the passenger's life hung in the balance, she stepped forward not as someone chasing approval, but as someone answering a higher calling. In that moment, the seat she had been denied no longer mattered. The world had shifted. The plane had become her stage, the crisis had become her script, and redemption was written in every action she took to save a life. Think about that. The very rejection that attempted to shrink her worth created the circumstances where her true value could no longer be ignored. Had she been sitting comfortably in first class, the story might have unfolded differently. She might not have been in the precise place where she was needed most. She might not have been visible to the passengers who now watched in awe as she rose. What looked like an insult became the setup for her impact. What looked like a setback became the stage for her strength. This is the lesson we must take with us. Rejection does not always signal the end of opportunity. Sometimes it conceals a greater opportunity, one not yet visible, one that can only emerge through perseverance. Too often we view rejection as final, as if someone else's now has the power to define our destiny. But that is not how history is made. That is not how lives are changed. Again and again, we see it. The door that closes becomes the wall that is climbed, and from the top of that wall, the world sees us differently. What makes rejection a stage for redemption is not the change in others, but the steadfastness within us. That mother could have given up. She could have allowed anger or despair to consume her. But instead, she carried herself as if the story was not finished, as if there was more yet to be written. And because she did, when the moment arrived, she was ready to show the strength that had always been there. Redemption is not about erasing rejection. It is about transforming it. It is about turning the moment of not you into the proof of yes, me. It is about living in such a way that the same people who dismissed us are compelled to witness what we are capable of. It is about enduring the sting long enough to see it give way to something far greater. When the plane began to shudder, when the overhead bins rattled and the voices of passengers rose in fear, the storm was no longer an idea. It was real. The sky outside darkened, the aircraft tilted, and suddenly even those who had felt secure in their seats began to feel powerless. Panic has a way of spreading faster than the turbulence itself. In those moments, fear is contagious, anxiety leaps from one person to another, and reason gives way to the primal instinct to cry out. But not everyone reacted that way. In the midst of the storm, there was one woman who refused to let fear dictate her response. The same woman who had been told she did not belong in first class now stood as if the storm had no power over her spirit. Perseverance had taught her something that comfort alone never could see, that the real test of character is not whether we can avoid storms, but whether we can remain steady when they arrive. This is the deeper meaning of perseverance. Too often, we mistake it for sheer endurance, for the ability to simply grit our teeth and outlast hardship. But perseverance is more than holding on until the storm passes. It is learning how to become calm within it. It is the choice to respond with clarity when others are overcome by fear. It is the strength to breathe deeply when chaos demands we unravel. It is the quiet courage to be still, not because the storm is small, because we refuse to let it shake the foundation of who we are. That single mother understood storms. She had lived through them long before she boarded that plane. Her life had been marked by trials that would have broken others, nights of exhaustion, bills that outweighed her paycheck, the lonely weight of responsibilities carried alone. And yet, through it all, she had learned how to find stillness inside herself. She had built, day by day, a reservoir of strength that was not shaken easily. So when turbulence struck, she did not crumble. She became what she had trained herself to be through years of unseen struggle, the calm within the storm. This is what perseverance does. It reshapes us. It teaches us that storms are not interruptions to life. They are a part of life. They are not anomalies to be avoided, but experiences to be navigated. And in the navigation, we find ourselves transformed. Perseverance turns suffering into wisdom, fear into focus, and chaos into an opportunity to reveal who we truly are. When the passenger collapsed and cries of panic erupted, she did not hesitate. While others froze, she moved. Others questioned, she acted. The storm inside the cabin mirrored the storm outside the plane, but she was not swept up in either. She stepped forward with the kind of calm that only perseverance produces. Her voice was steady, her hands were firm. She carried within her a peace that reminded everyone else that not all was lost, that someone knew what to do, that someone had chosen to be still while others trembled. And this, too, is the legacy of perseverance. It is never just for ourselves. The calm we cultivate within us becomes a gift to those around us. Our steadiness steadies others. Our clarity creates room for others to breathe. Our decision to hold fast in the storm reminds others that they, too, can endure. The perseverance of one mother became the lifeline for an entire flight. There is something profoundly human in that image, a storm raging outside, fear erupting inside, and yet one figure standing calm in the middle of it all. She was not spared the turbulence. She was not exempt from the danger. But she was equipped with something stronger than fear. And that is the essence of perseverance. Not escaping the storm, but carrying within us a stillness that no storm can uproot. It is easy to be calm when skies are clear. It is easy to be steady when life is smooth. But true perseverance is forged when the winds rise and the ground beneath us shakes. It is in those moments that calm becomes not just a feeling, but a discipline, a practice, a way of being. And it is in those moments that perseverance shows itself to be not just endurance, but transformation. On that plane, eyes had been drawn first to the well-dressed, the confident, the people seated in first class with their polished shoes and tailored suits. The assumption was simply strength, importance, and leadership must sit there. The overlooked woman, single mother in modest clothes, was not expected to hold any power, not expected to rise in the face of crisis. She was the background, not the centerpiece. But history has shown us, again and again, that real strength often hides in plain sight, carried by those the world dismisses. It is found in the calloused hands of workers who build while others take credit. It is found in the quiet persistence of caregivers who hold families together without applause. It is found in those who carry burdens unseen, not for recognition, but for love, for duty, for survival. The single mother represented that truth. For years, she had lived with the weight of two lives on her shoulders, her own and her child's. She had faced bills that never seemed to end, exhaustion that no rest could fully cure, a loneliness that came from walking paths most cannot imagine. And yet, through it all, she endured. The world did not stop to honor her sacrifice. The world did not place her on pedestals or carve her name into marble. But her strength grew in silence, shaped not by praise, but by perseverance. So when the crisis struck in the sky, the strength others had overlooked revealed itself. She rose not with drama, but with steady hands and clear eyes. The very people who had judged her by appearance now saw what had always been there, a woman forged in the fire of hardship, carrying within her the unshakable ability to rise. This is the paradox of strength. We imagine it as loud, obvious, adorned with titles and honors. But true strength often looks like humility. It looks like patience in the face of insult. It looks like endurance in the face of trial. It looks like people the world walks past, never realizing the battles they have already won. Think of the countless times in history when the overlooked carried the world forward. The immigrant worker who labored unseen, yet built the foundations of cities. The teacher in a small classroom, whose name never appeared in headlines, yet sparked the minds that would one day change the world. The mother, the nurse, the farmer, the soldier, the neighbor. Ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in substance. They remind us that strength is not always packaged in the form society recognizes. Strength is not reserved for the few. It lives in the many, waiting for moments to reveal itself. On that flight, the overlooked woman became the anchor. She did not rise because of wealth, because of status, because of recognition. She rose because strength had already been cultivated in her daily struggle. It had been built when she woke up after sleepless nights to keep working. It had been built when she carried her children forward without anyone to lean on. It had been built when she kept choosing hope in the face of despair. The world did not see that strength until it needed her, but it was there all along. Isn't this the truth about those we overlook every day? The security guard who quietly protects without thanks. The janitor who cleans spaces others take for granted. The nurse who works nights so that others may heal. They may be overlooked, underestimated, even dismissed. But in moments of crisis, when the fragile illusions of status fall away, their strength becomes undeniable. The lesson is clear: we must look again. We must open our eyes to the people we pass by. For within them may live the very resilience, the very courage, the very leadership the world needs. The woman on that flight was one of millions. Millions who hold quiet strength, waiting for their moment to show the world what they are made of. When the passengers boarded that plane, greatness seemed easy to identify. It seemed to sit in first class, in the comfortable seats reserved for those with influence, wealth, or prestige. The tickets had been scanned, the labels assigned, and the unspoken message was clear: this is where the important people sit. The woman who was told she did not belong in that section was, by society's measure, excluded from greatness. Her story was not written in fine suits or corporate titles. Her seat was not cushioned by privilege. She entered quietly, unnoticed, carrying only the history of her struggle and the strength of her perseverance. But when the crisis struck, when panic threatened to overtake order, when lives were at risk, it was not titles or tickets that rose to the occasion. It was action. Greatness revealed itself not in the comfort of luxury, but in the courage of service. And that single mother, a place among those thought to be great, showed what greatness truly is. This is the illusion we must confront. Society has long equated greatness with position. The title on the door, the rank on the uniform, the balance in the account, seat number on a boarding pass. These are the measures the world uses. But the truth is different. Greatness is not found in what we are given, but in what we give. It is not found in what we sit upon, but in what we stand for. The single mother understood this. She did not wear the name badge of a doctor that day, yet when a passenger collapsed, she acted with the skill of one. She did not sit in the aisle reserved for leaders, yet when leadership was needed, she stepped into the role. She had no official authority, no commanding presence, no recognition from the airline or the crowd. And yet, in the only way that truly matters, she was the greatest among them, the one who acted when it counted. Greatness is tested not in moments of ease, but in moments of crisis. When all is calm, anyone can appear strong, anyone can seem important. But when the storm arrives, when fear takes hold, when decisions must be made in seconds, the mask of status falls away. What remains is action. Who moves? Who serves? Who gives of themselves for others? That is where greatness lies. Her story teaches us that we must redefine what it means to be great. It is not about sitting at the front of the plane, but about standing up when someone needs help. It is not about the recognition engraved on a plaque, but about the impact left on a life. It is not about the applause of the many, but about the quiet, steady courage that emerges when the world is trembling. History, too, confirms this truth. The greatest moments have not always been carried by kings or generals, but by ordinary people whose actions became extraordinary. A nurse in a war zone, a teacher in a rural school, a worker who risked everything to protect others. These are the lives that remind us that greatness is not a privilege, but a responsibility. It is not seated at the top. It is lived at every level, in every act of courage and compassion. On that flight, tickets determined comfort, but they did not determine character. Titles could demand respect, but they could not command action. In the end, it was the overlooked woman, the one told, "Not you," who showed everyone what greatness looks like. It looked like steady hands over a patient. It looked like courage in the face of fear. It looked like a life saved because one person chose to act. Greatness does not wait for permission. It does not require a uniform. It does not ask for an invitation. It is revealed in the moment when action is needed, and someone steps forward not for themselves, but for others. Greatness, then, is not seated in privilege. It is carried in the human spirit, waiting for the moment when courage and compassion must become more than words. The plane was steady when it first took off, filled with the usual hum of engines and the quiet shuffle of passengers settling into their seats. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment. People opened books, adjusted their seats, or drifted towards sleep. Everything appeared ordinary. The flight, the passengers, even the single mother sitting in a place she had not chosen, still carrying the sting of being told she did not belong. But life has a way of testing us in unexpected hours. The ordinary shifted in an instant when turbulence shook the plane. Overhead compartments rattled, cups spilled, and anxious voices rose. The calm was broken, and in its place came uncertainty. Fear spread quickly, feeding on itself, until the atmosphere inside the cabin mirrored the storm outside. It was then, amid the rising chaos, that the true test began. This is the nature of chaos. It strips away the illusion of control. It reminds us how fragile our plans can be. And in those moments, when certainty is gone, people reveal who they really are. Some freeze. Some panic. Some wait for someone else to act. But there are always a few who rise. Not because they feel no fear, but because they choose courage over fear. That single mother was one of them. She had boarded the flight quietly, overlooked by nearly everyone. But when the passenger collapsed, when gasps filled the air and desperation gripped the cabin, she did not hesitate. She rose, moved forward, and became the calm center that others desperately needed. What moments before had seemed like rejection now transformed into revelation. Her courage, forged through years of hardship, was revealed not in a headline or a stage, but in the eisel of an airplane, where a life hung in the balance. This is the deeper truth about courage. It is not reserved for the famous or the powerful. It is not born in titles, wealth, or privilege. Courage is often carried by those who appear ordinary, who walk unnoticed through the world, who bear responsibilities quietly, who endure trials in silence. It lives within people whose names are not celebrated, but whose choices in critical moments can shape the destiny of others. We see this pattern everywhere. A firefighter rushing into a burning building when others are rushing out. A teacher shielding children in the midst of danger. A neighbor stepping forward to help in a disaster not because they are trained, but because they care. Again and again, ordinary people become extraordinary when chaos calls them to rise. The courage of the single mother on that flight did not appear suddenly. It had been growing inside her long before she stepped onto the plane. Every long night of work, every sacrifice made for her children, every burden she carried without complaint. These became the quiet training ground for her strength. She had learned how to remain steady in personal storms, and so when the public storm came, she was ready. Her courage was not new, it was revealed. And isn't that the truth for so many? Chaos does not create courage, it exposes it. It shows the world what has already been built within. Those who rise in moments of crisis are not always the strongest in appearance, but they are the ones who have cultivated resilience in the hidden places of life. They are the ones who, when others falter, can draw from a well that has been filled through perseverance, faith, and sacrifice. When we look at that flight, we see a picture of society itself. Many looked first to those seated in comfort, expecting leadership from the front rows. But leadership came from the back, from the one overlooked, from the one underestimated. That is the extraordinary power of ordinary people. They carry within them the ability to shift the entire atmosphere when chaos threatens to consume it. Her courage changed the narrative of that flight, began to subside as passengers saw her act with confidence. Anxiety gave way to a measure of trust as her presence steadied the crew. She was not simply saving a life. She was restoring hope to an entire plane of people who had forgotten, in those terrifying minutes, what courage looks like. This is the paradox of chaos. It feels like destruction, but it often becomes the stage where hidden strength is revealed. It exposes the fragility of appearances and reminds us that courage is not bound to status. In fact, the ones society overlooks are often the ones who rise highest when the ground beneath us shakes. For that single mother, hope was never loud. It was not shouted from rooftops or written on banners. It was quiet, steady, often hidden beneath the exhaustion of long nights and the weight of unpaid bills. Yet it was there. A small flame she refused to let die. Each morning she woke up before the sun, she carried hope with her. Each time she chose to go without so her children could have more, she carried hope. Hope was the belief that her sacrifices, unseen by most, would one day bear fruit. Hope, in its truest form, is not denial of optimism. It is not the denial of hardship. It is the decision to believe in a future worth fighting for, even when the present feels unbearable. For that mother, the hope was not that life would suddenly become easy, but that her effort, her struggle, her perseverance would not be wasted. She believed that tomorrow would honor what she endured today. On that flight, when she was denied her seat, she had every reason to feel the opposite of hope. She had worked hard, saved carefully, and finally allowed herself a moment of recognition, a first-class seat, a small symbol of how far she had come. And then, in an instant, it was stripped away. That moment could have broken her spirit. It could have reinforced the cruel lie that her sacrifice would never be enough, that no matter what she did, the world would continue to close its doors. But she did not surrender her hope. She sat down, quiet but unshaken, because she knew what others did not see. Her worth was not measured by the seat she occupied. Her sacrifices were not diminished by their rejection. Her hope did not depend on the recognition of strangers, but on the unshakable belief that tomorrow would honor what today had cost her. And then the turbulence came, the chaos came, the life-threatening emergency came, and suddenly, her years of sacrifice, the training, the discipline, the resilience built in silence, became the very tools needed to save a life. Hope had not deceived her. Hope had prepared her. The quiet belief that her struggles mattered found its vindication in the moment she was needed most. This is the essence of hope. It is not passive. It is active. It strengthens the weary hands. It keeps people walking when the road is long. It fuels sacrifice, because sacrifice without hope feels empty, but sacrifice with hope feels purposeful. Hope whispers that the pain of today can become the promise of tomorrow. Think of the countless people who live this truth, working multiple jobs so their children can go to school. Immigrants leaving behind everything familiar, carrying only the belief that tomorrow will reward their risk. Nurses working through the night, exhausted but believing their care will bring healing. Soldiers standing guard in distant lands, believing their vigilance will protect their loved ones back home. None of them are celebrated daily. Many are overlooked. Yet they continue, because hope tells them that the world can still be shaped by their sacrifice. The single mother's story is not unique in its essence, though it is powerful in its example. Every sacrifice she made, the meals she skipped, the hours she worked, the humiliation she endured, was carried by hope. Without it, she could not have endured. Without it, she could not have risen on that plain when others froze. Hope was not just her belief in a better future for herself, but for her children, for her community, for the very passengers whose lives were steady because of her courage. Hope is often misunderstood as fragile, as something delicate. But true hope is fierce. It does not shatter under rejection. It does not fade in the face of difficulty. It grows stronger precisely because it has to endure trial after trial. Hope is the strength that makes sacrifice possible because it ties the pain of today to the possibility of tomorrow. That mother lived her life as proof of this. Every step she took, every burden she carried, was fueled by the hope that it was not in vain. And when the day came for her strength to be revealed, when she stood in the aisle of that plane, steady and unshaken while fear rippled around her, she became the living reminder that hope, even when quiet, is never wasted. When the passenger collapsed and fear spread through the cabin, no one asked for sommes. No one asked about degrees, income, or titles. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was who would serve. Leadership did not come from the captain locked in the cockpit, nor from those seated in the rows society considered prestigious. Temperate. It came from the single mother who chose to rise. And the way she led was not through command or authority, but through service. This is the truth about leadership that the world too often forgets. Leadership is not the privilege of power, the responsibility of service. It is not measured by how many follow us, but by how many we are willing to lift. Real leadership is revealed when we set aside our own comfort to meet the needs of others. That woman did not seek recognition. She did not calculate whether her actions would bring reward. She moved because someone was in need, because life demanded a response, and because her spirit would not allow her to sit idle while others suffered. That is what makes service the highest form of leadership. It is leadership born not of ego, but of sacrifice. History offers us the same lesson again and again. The leaders most remembered are not those who held the grandest titles, but those who served the deepest needs. Think of the civil rights worker who marched not for fame, but for freedom. Think of the humanitarian who crossed battle lines to bring food to the hungry. Think of the parent who holds a family together through struggle, leading not by speeches, but by service at the kitchen table and sacrifice at the workplace. These are the lives that teach us leadership at its truest core. On that flight, single mother embodied this principle. She had been denied recognition earlier, told she did not belong, stripped of the dignity of the seat she had rightfully earned. But when the crisis came, she chose not to dwell on her insult. She chose to serve, and in serving, she became the leader the entire plane needed. Her calm voice reassured the fearful. Her steady hands gave the crew direction. Her knowledge restored a life that hung in the balance. She led not from a position of privilege, but from the posture of service. Service transforms the way leadership is felt. When a person serves, others follow not because they must, but because they trust. Sefam. They see in service a kind of courage that commands respect without demanding it. They see in service a kind of love that transcends authority. They see in service the rare quality of someone who puts the well-being of others above their own pride. That is the kind of leadership that endures, because it speaks to the deepest needs of the human heart. The world often mistakes leadership for control. It believes leadership is about issuing orders, sitting at the top, or holding the most influence. But true leadership is something else entirely. True leadership is stepping forward when others hesitate. It is offering help when it costs us something. It is carrying burdens that were never ours to carry, simply because we see another human being in need. That is why service is the highest form of leadership, because it is rooted in humility. It does not wait for applause. It does not need recognition. It does not demand position. It acts, it lifts. And in doing so, it inspires others to act, to give, to lift in turn. One act of service multiplies, and soon the atmosphere of fear is replaced by the atmosphere of courage. On that flight, passengers witnessed it firsthand. They had judged her moments earlier as someone who did not belong. But in serving, she reversed their assumptions. She became the leader not because she claimed the seat of status, but because she carried the heart of service. And in the process, she reminded every soul on that plane of what leadership truly means. When the gate agent told the single mother that she did not belong in first class, the message was clear. Belonging is something handed out by those in power, and she was not worthy to receive it. That is how gatekeepers operate. They decide who looks the part, who fits the mold, who is granted entry. They control doors and positions and opportunities, and too often, they mistake their control for authority over someone's worth. But belonging does not work that way. Belonging is not stamped on a ticket. It is not written into a title. It cannot be withheld by prejudice, nor denied by bias. Belonging is deeper than access. It is rooted in character, and character is something no gatekeeper can give and no gatekeeper can take away. That single mother could have let their denial define her. She could have believed the lie that she was less than, that she had no place among those who walked with confidence into the cabin of privilege. But she did not surrender to that story. She sat down, carrying with her the dignity of a life lived in sacrifice and the quiet knowledge that her worth had already been proven. Her belonging was not dependent on their permission. It lived in the strength of her character. When the storm came, when the passenger's life fell into her hands, her character revealed itself. She acted with courage, with skill, with compassion, and in that moment, everyone on the flight understood she belonged not because of where she was seated, because of who she was. The power of her character erased every question about her place. This is the truth about belonging. It cannot be handed out like a gift, because what can be given can also be taken away. True belonging is not fragile, not conditional, not at the mercy of someone else's judgment. True belonging is claimed through integrity, through action, through the consistency of character. It is lived, not granted. We see this throughout history. The leaders who shook nations were often those the gatekeepers rejected. The voices that changed societies were voices once silenced, voices told they did not belong in the halls of power. But they persevered not by begging for recognition, but by standing firm in character until the world could no longer ignore their belonging. The same is true in our daily lives. Students who are told they will never succeed, but who study late into the night until their excellence speaks for itself. Workers who are overlooked for promotions yet continue to bring integrity and skill to every task until they redefine what leadership looks like. Communities denied equal access, yet who keep building, keep creating, keep showing the world that belonging is not something to be conferred by the privileged few, but something to be claimed by the collective strength of their character. The mother on that flight embodied this reality. The gatekeeper denied her a seat, but they could not deny her belonging. Her belonging lived in the years of sacrifice that had shaped her into a woman of resilience. Her belonging lived in the compassion that drove her to act when another life was at stake. Her belonging lived in the calm she brought to a cabin filled with fear. She did not wait for permission. She did not seek validation. She claimed her belonging through the undeniable power of character. And here lies the challenge for us all. Too often, we wait for gatekeepers to open doors for us, to tell us we are worthy, to affirm that we belong. But true belonging is not something we wait for. It is something we live out. It is claimed not by demand, but by the consistency of who we are when no one is watching, by the courage we show when no one else will act, by the way we serve, endure, persevere even in silence. Gatekeepers may control access to seats, to spaces, to titles, but they cannot touch character. And when character rises, when it reveals itself in moments of crisis or sacrifice, it silences every denial, every doubt, every attempt to exclude. That is the belonging that endures. The belonging that is claimed, not given. When the plane jolted with sudden turbulence and the air filled with fear, there was a silence heavier than the sound of the engines. Strangers looked at one another eyes wide, waiting for someone else to act, waiting for reassurance that did not come. And then, when a passenger collapsed in the aisle, panic threatened to take over entirely. It was in that moment that a single mother, who had already been humiliated and denied her rightful seat, chose to rise. Her courage was not loud. It was not the kind of courage that seeks applause or recognition. It was the quiet, resolute kind. The courage that comes from years of sacrifice, from nights of uncertainty, from a life that had demanded strength when no one was watching. She stood, steady and calm, while others froze. And because she chose to act, others found their footing, too. This is the power of courage. It does not just shape the one who carries it, it radiates outward, steadying those who are shaken, giving strength to those who doubt, igniting hope in those who fear. One act of courage can shift an entire atmosphere. On that plane, her actions were practical, checking for signs of life, directing others to bring water, guiding the crew with confidence. But her impact was far greater than the tasks themselves. Passengers who had been paralyzed by fear began to breathe again. Crew members who were unsure of their next step suddenly had a model of composure. Even the man whose life hung in the balance was steadied not only by her hands but by her presence, her refusal to let fear dictate the outcome. This is why courage matters. Because in moments of chaos, most people do not need perfection. They need presence. They do not need flawless answers. They need someone who is willing to step forward. Courage is contagious. It spreads quietly, reminding people that fear does not have the final word. Think of the moments in history when ordinary men and women have stepped forward with one act of courage that rippled into the lives of many. A single protester standing before tanks, showing the world that oppression could not silence the human spirit. A teacher refusing to give up on a child, altering the course of that student's future. A firefighter running into danger while others ran out, giving hope where despair threatened to consume. In each case, courage was not grand in appearance, but its effect was monumental. The single mother on that flight carried the same truth. She was not a celebrity. She held no title. She was not seated in the rows that society reserves for the privileged. And yet, when she rose, she led the entire cabin. Not because she was asked, but because she was willing. Her one act of courage steadied the lives of everyone on board, not only in the practical sense of saving a man's life, but in the deeper sense of restoring belief, of reminding each person present that strength can come from the most unexpected places. Courage, after all, is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite fear. And when one person makes that decision, creates a space where others can do the same. Her courage gave others permission to find their own. Her steady hands became a steadying force for an entire flight of souls caught in uncertainty. We must remember this in our own lives. Often we underestimate the power of a single courageous act. We think courage must be monumental, recorded in history books, celebrated in headlines. But most often, courage shows itself in smaller moments, speaking truth when silence would be easier, standing up for someone overlooked, choosing integrity when compromise seems safer, offering compassion when bitterness feels justified. These acts may seem small, but to those who witness them, or to those who depend on them, they can mean everything. That is why courage matters not only in great crises but in the ordinary days of our lives. Because in every environment, a workplace, a family, a community, there are moments when fear seeks to dominate, when uncertainty threatens to divide. In those moments, one act of courage can hold the line, can steady the trembling, can show others the path through. And more often than not, it is the person least expected, the one overlooked or underestimated, who becomes the anchor of courage for many. When the single mother stood in that cabin, rising from her seat after being told she did not belong, she was not only rising for herself. She was rising for her children, for their future, and for all who would come after them. Her decision to act in that moment was more than an isolated choice. It was part of a legacy, chain of strength stretching both backward and forward in time. Every mother carries within her the weight of generations. She carries the sacrifices of those who came before, and she carries the hopes of those who will come after. Her actions echo, shaping lives she may never meet, influencing paths she may never walk. When she rises, she does not rise alone. She carries with her the unseen hands of ancestors who endured hardship and the unspoken prayers of children yet to be born. This truth was alive on that flight. In the eyes of the passengers, she may have been just one woman stepping forward in a crisis. But, in reality, she was much more. She was the living embodiment of generations of resilience. Her calm voice and steady hands carried not just her own strength, but the accumulated wisdom of those who had taught her to endure, to sacrifice, and to lead with love. Think of the countless mothers across history who have risen in moments of struggle. The mother who worked 2 jobs so her children could go to school. The mother who stood in protest lines demanding justice for her community. The mother who nurtured, protected, and guided her family even when the world refused to see her worth. Each of these women rose, and in rising, they lifted entire generations beyond the weight of their circumstances. On that flight, the single mother's actions sent a message not only to the passengers around her, but to the children waiting at home. She showed them what it means to carry strength with grace, to lead with compassion, to claim belonging not by demand but by character. Long after the plane touched the ground, her children would remember the story, not of the humiliation she faced when she was denied a seat, but of the courage she displayed when she chose to rise anyway. That memory becomes a foundation, slanted in the hearts of the next generation, teaching them to rise when it is their turn. Generational rise is never accidental. It is built on choices made in quiet moments, in unseen places, and often under difficult circumstances. A mother's decision to stand tall in the face of injustice, to act in the midst of fear, to love when bitterness would be easier. These are not just personal victories. They are generational victories. They rewrite narratives. They open doors. They build bridges that those who follow can walk across. The single mother's story is powerful because it shows how rising once can ripple endlessly. The passengers on that flight, many of whom had dismissed her, witnessed firsthand the strength she carried. That encounter would shape how they viewed others who looked like her, others who had been underestimated, others who had been told they did not belong. And when her children grew older, they would walk into a world where their mother's courage had already changed perceptions, even if only in small, invisible ways. This is how change endures. It does not always begin with policies or institutions. More often, it begins with one person who chooses to rise, to act, to defy the story written against them. And when that person is a mother, the impact is magnified because her rise is never for herself alone. It is for her children, for her community, for every life her courage will touch. On that flight, she stood as more than a passenger. She stood as a representative of countless mothers who have refused to be defined by limitation, who have risen above denial, who have carried the weight of generations on their shoulders and still found the strength to walk forward. Her rise was a moment in time, but its impact reached far beyond that plane, far beyond that day, into the unseen future of generations who would walk taller because she had shown them how. On that flight, every passenger carried their own story. Some were business travelers chasing deadlines, some were families eager to return home, some were strangers escaping struggles they never voiced. They came from different cities, different walks of life, and different dreams for tomorrow. But when the crisis struck, all those differences faded into the background. In that moment, they were not individuals defined by their seats or their status. They were one community in the sky, bound together by shared uncertainty and shared hope. It was the single mother who rose first. She steadied the panic, brought calm into chaos, and reminded the cabin that fear does not have the last word. Yet even as she acted, she did not save that life alone. A crew member fetched the medical kit. A passenger handed over water. Others made space, followed her directions, and stood ready to help however they could. It was not one person who kept that flight steady. It was the collective response of many hearts and many hands, each adding their part to the whole. This is the truth that her story lays bare.